Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange, and we've got two guests in studio today, good buddies of mine for a long time. Happy to welcome Chad Hendren, Field Solution Architect. Welcome in.
Thank you.
Chad, I've known since the mid-2000s, 2005, our Sun Microsystems days. Maybe we'll tell some stories here. Maybe we won't. But always good to see you. And Andrew Silifant, Solutions Director, first timer.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it is good. It's been long overdue, has it not?
Very much so. I'm looking forward to this.
You've been at Pure for 6 years now?
I think it's almost 7.
It's almost 7. Yeah, starting in the SAP space and then navigating through so many different roles here.
MySQL,
Yeah,
databases, analytics. Yeah, it's a lot.
it's a lot, but it's good. You know a lot about many different things. So welcome both of you. Super chuffed that you are in here today. Chad, I'm going to come back to you. You are a first timer as well. We did meet first at Sun 20 years ago and worked together. What'd you do? We lost touch a little bit. But what'd you navigate to do and how'd you end up here?
Yeah, thanks to the world of social media, we were able to stay somewhat connected.
A little bit. Yeah.
But sure. So at at Sun, we obviously got acquired by Oracle. So that led to about a 12-year run with Oracle, and decided to make the move into more of the big data space with a couple of data-centric companies, and then had the opportunity to join Pure about 5.5 years ago. When I got that opportunity, I think you were one of the first people I reached out to find out what's going on here.
It was a fun day. It's always fun when I see former colleagues that made the choice to come here. There were a couple of Oracle's, gentleman in Japan, right? Same thing, who was a systems engineer just like you at Sun, and he landed here as well. And I know they're good people who get tech and get IT. I don't even know your history, Silifant.
My history is interesting. So my career started at HP when it was still HP.
Yeah.
Then I became...
Would it not be H from where you're from?
Maybe. I then went into consulting for a few years, and then I ended up here. And I've been here ever since. It's been a great journey.
It is a good journey. How'd you get your technical chops? Because you're very deep in a lot of things. Is that from schooling, self-learning?
I kind of got left alone for a long period of time. And while they were figuring out what to do with me, I figured out what I wanted to do. And so I just started to become very deep into multiple different things. So for example, started out, shockingly enough, with HANA, one of the most difficult databases to install.
Yeah.
Once I'd crossed that chasm, I was like, Oracle's fine. I was wrong. And then SQL, I was like, I did this backwards. So it kind of all built on top of one another. And once you get past all of the principles and you get through all of that, you start to see the connective tissue. And you realize that there's a lot of similarities, and a lot of it's about the basics of understanding how to do step one.
Yeah. And getting down to the core, which is really that everything we're talking about is about data, which is why we're here doing this episode. Or let me back that up. Why are we here? Why are we talking about data lakehouses? Why are we talking about data pipelines? Chad, I'll hit you first.
I'm seeing a lot of interest from that out in the field in the Southeast here, specifically around ways to help control cloud costs, cloud spend, as well as laying a foundation for AI and ML pipelines.
Okay. Andrew, take it further. What are we talking about here when we're talking about a data lakehouse? I remember it when it was the artist formerly known as data warehouses.
Interestingly enough, last year I was going around the company and I was like, this AI trend is interesting. We're going to make money in data lakes. And everyone was like, so what now? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so I was just going around to execs and saying, folks, data lakes are data lake houses, which is just a new architecture, just a new way to refine data, to collect it in a centralized place. But more importantly, like access it better across enterprise and at enterprise scale. Databricks coined the term, so let's give them credit for it. But all of these things were really, really important because in the age of AI, it's about taking data from its beginning stage where it's created, and then moving it through a set of refinement processes into a store, and then using it in various functions. The thing is, data needs to be optimized, refined, feature engineered to make it more useful for something else. And so each stage of a pipeline, once again going into the lakehouse, touches on a different piece of data. So at its core, like the lakehouse is just where you're storing it and how you store it. The pipeline is the different stages you're storing it at and using it for.
What is different now than what we might have been doing 15 or 20 years ago when you just were calling it data warehousing and doing ETL and things like what has advanced from that period of time? Like, are we just talking about it in different terms, or has the technology changed? itself from that time. I know a lot of times we dealt with silos and challenges with data living in different places. And so that held back those processes. I know there's a lot of cleaning of the data that's needed, as you say, maybe to get it refined. I'll throw it out to both, whoever wants to tackle, like, what have we hit?
I can unfortunately go very deep on this.
Do it. I'm intrigued on it, really.
So data lakehouses are actually a combination between data lakes and data warehouses.
Okay.
Data lakes are horrible.
Okay.
End of story. Why? They're effectively too easy to become data swamps. Classification, tagging, and being able to structure your workload around it is really difficult.
Okay.
And so if you think about it, data lakes are just easy places to shove things and forget about them for the most part. Data warehouses where you had your structured reporting engines that told you what was happening in the business. Both of these had pros and cons, but the data lakehouse is a combination between these two architectures effectively. So the change, to answer your question, the change that has happened and the change that has made this possible is both technology and architecture. So technology-wise, object storage, favorite thing from the 2010s, effectively an infinitely scalable way to store data. Combine that with innovations in terms of, there's a word for this, standardization around Parquet as files, open file formats, and open table formats. You suddenly have a new world where multiple tooling functions can access the same data. Your problem with data lakes and data warehouses.
Data warehouses, yes. We have the two, and
is effectively it's a proprietary format. Open table formats open up the universe so that your entire pipeline is talking a similar or the same language, but can iterate on itself. So go back to data warehousing, I'm stuck with one vendor. Data lakehouses, I need a scale-out architecture, but only parts of it need to be scale-out. The data warehousing function, for example, with Dremio or Starburst as vendors, could be implemented as one consumer and producer of the pipeline. You've got other vendors such as Kafka, Confluent, Renpanda, who are all about ingest. So effectively, the data pipeline becomes this endpoint of, you have the data lake house, which is an architectural implementation of metadata, open data formats, and the ability to organize and structure things appropriately to then get it to a more useful stage. This is important for AI because, as we saw last year, there were loads of models that were being trained. Everyone was like, oh, my model's training is failing. And that's because the data wasn't in an optimal state. And that's a data scientist's job. They're paid lots of money for this.
Yeah, they are.
And so you just keep iterating through that. And a data lakehouse is the optimal format to go and do this in. Just because it has that natural endpoint of, it's easy to interop a processing structure on top of it. It's easier to use different tooling for, and also multiple tools can understand the same language.
That wasn't even a double click. That was a triple click.
I'm so sorry to everybody for the master's level.
No, it worked. You're like Andrewpedia going in with that. It's actually super helpful to get that backdrop because I'm not sure, most people tuning in will have had that level of detail going into that. And it's taking the chocolate and the peanut butter of the warehouse and the lake and putting it together into something that's structured. And so anytime I can use the Reese's example, we're all better off.
So say going way back with that one.
No, I tend to movies, pop culture references, things of that nature. I'm going to hit our stat of the episode and then see what you guys think. And you mentioned Dremio. So Dremio had a nice report come out in January of 2025. Talking about 77% of IT decision makers were already familiar with the data lakehouse concept that you mentioned because it is newish, and 85% of orgs were already leveraging them for AI and ML development. Now, migration trends, super interesting. Data lakehouses emerging as a replacement for many of those older architectures. 41% of companies migrated from cloud data warehouses, some of those inefficiency, and 23% moving from data lakes. So super interesting. You see a lot of customers in these spaces. What do you think is causing the trends? And it may build a little bit on Andrew's definition there, right?
Well, he definitely hit on, again, as we know, 301 level, there are a lot of
that's right. Captain really 301.
There, yeah. But, certainly the rise in the amount and volume of unstructured data, right? We've all seen the trends that show the exponential growth of the amount of unstructured data. So being able to bring that in, that helps us move away from or works better, right? Compared to a data warehouse, right? With it's very structured look. And then, as you say, you can actually use the data in the data lakehouse as opposed to just the data lake as here, or the data swamp. So that's definitely driving things. And then also one of the things that I'm seeing with that is being able to use the data lakehouse as a an intermediary, if you will, before putting the data, or allow you to be more prescriptive of what data you're putting into, say, cloud data warehouses, right? So that I was just talking with a retailer this last week that's having struggles with their cloud expenditure because they have people running ad hoc queries on massive amounts of historical data.
Shadow IT.
Yep.
Right.
So now they're looking at ways to just keep the tools in the cloud. They're great tools, right? But be able to be more prescriptive of what data goes in there, what reports, what queries are being done on that data, and keeping the historical data on-prem in that data lakehouse, giving all their users access to that without having to incur the cloud expense.
Good backdrop. What happens to the users when they can't get what they need, right? They're running reports, they're running queries, they're querying the data. A lot of that stuff is serialized when it's sorting through. And what's the level of frustration for people that are trying to make business decisions when they can't get what they need?
So let's take the worst case scenario, banking.
Yeah.
So Hadoop clusters were really popular with banks because it allowed them to run liquidity reports really quickly.
Yeah.
Now, those worked over time, but obviously they come with their own problems. When you say the frustrations they have, if you can't get these liquidity reports done, you have a problem with like the FCC or whatever controller is in place at that point in time. So if I'm running a query that's structured and nothing comes back, you've got a period of time you've got to correct it. So you can't do that. Big problem. Other levels of frustration is incomplete data. So think about that data pipeline I was talking about. There's a very popular processing architecture called Medallion. It takes it from a bronze state to a gold state using scorecard mentality. Bronze is ingested, not classifiable. Silver is classified, understood, and gold is perfect, business level aggregates. Business level aggregates are what you would use to run these liquidity reports, but you have to kind of run through the pipeline to get there. So if any one of that pipeline breaks, you're staying up all night to make sure it does it, because the SLAs are what backs these environments now. It's not just about shoving a data center full of servers or playing your cloud bill. You actually need to be able to meet an SLA as an operator. So the users themselves are on the hook for this. So think about it as the chain of screaming. You go down, the operator can't get it. The next person's like, why can't I get this? So everybody's awake at night. That's the level of frustration in the most regulated industries. But even at its core, understanding what's going on in your business from a day-to-day KPI perspective, it requires comprehensive reporting because we are in a data-heavy version of the world. I don't think we'll ever not be in a data-heavy version of the world again, by the way.
Yeah, well, and there's also things around compliance and reporting, and if you're doing 10Ks and dealing with stock markets and things like you can't have incomplete data. You can't have things not compiling for you in order to meet all that various levels of compliance. So that makes a lot of sense. Anything else that enterprises are trying to solve for here that you're talking to a lot of customers in this space as you deal with the unstructured and deal with migrations from warehouses and other things? What else are they trying to do?
Well, reduce copies of the data.
Yeah.
For compliance, you'd already mentioned that, right? Knowing where your data is, being able to classify it, and big challenges for them. And then we're also seeing, as we know, making multiple copies leads into infrastructure challenges in the data center, right? Having more and more things to need to store it, and cloud cost, if you will, for storing multiples. So really trying to drive around a lot of those inefficiencies and the time it takes to move data if you have to move it, as opposed to being able to access it in a singular location.
Good points. Andrew, I love, you're always very opinionated, which I love. And I say that with love. How well are organizations doing this today, right? If we go back to some of the things you're mentioning around having the right data, having the data be clean or prepared properly, how well are they doing? Give them a grade on a scorecard across the board.
Maybe just over 50% okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just busy thinking about it. And when you were asking me, I was just like, all I was hearing was credit card bills.
Yeah.
Because you can pay infinite money to like the cloud vendors.
Sure.
Because they've got very good platforms that can do these things. But then you also need an army of data scientists and data engineers to clean it, etc. And so your problem is, what's a passing grade for a limited budget? And I think that's a better question.
All right. When you bring budget into it, then yes, I guess so.
Yeah. Because the problem is just like, is it real time? Is it not? What's the volume of data that's going in? And then like, who's going to clean it at the back end? And I'd probably say as an industry, when I say industry, we're talking about global.
Yeah.
We're doing okay. I'd probably give us a 60% grade because you're never going to get to perfect.
Sure.
Perfect would literally be a state where every machine learning model on the planet just succeeds first time with the data it's given, which is just not
No,
possible.
and that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And we're going to be dealing with this through time because we keep adding new things to the industry. Like, think the iteration of SQL into the industry was revolutionary at its time. That was 40 years ago now. Now we're talking about Parquet files, and we're talking about Avro as a file format, Iceberg. We just keep adding things, which is more complexity, which means your pipelines become more complex. Your outcomes become more difficult to guarantee. And those are the kinds of things that vary that scorecard over time.
So it's going to be almost like a treadmill going forward. There's going to be parts that seem manageable, but new models, new techniques, new things are going to come in, which means you're just going to continue to keep running, which I guess everybody is contending with, right? With the data exploding in its creation so much and what needs to be done. I don't know if that's depressing or or just the reality of the situation that we have that's going on here. Chad, I want to hit back to you and talk a little bit around the use cases, if you will. When you're going out and you're talking AI, you're talking ML with people and just generally analytics, right? We're doing a lot of analytics things. You were kind of sucked into that here at Pure a few years back, which is kind of fun. I guess you're still adjacent to that. But what are some of the use cases? What are people trying to do across the board there?
Sure. We hear a lot of people, I actually hear a lot of people in the Southeast come to me and say, we know we have to do AI. We're going to do AI. We don't know where to start.
Okay.
We don't even know use cases. So we end up talking a lot of the well-baked, if you will, use cases like RAG for retrieval augmented generation.
Mm-hmm.
Will allow you to combine an off-the-shelf large language model with your proprietary data in a vector database. So now your users can pull back information on your proprietary information without having to put that out in the cloud, without having to train your own models. So we do see a decent amount of that. Also working with folks, not really we're talking on this piece, but in the video.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Andrew, your favorite subject, databases.
They're amazing.
They are amazing. But where databases play in this, right? I had Anthony Nocentino on a while back. We talk a lot about vectorizing databases and having some of the AI capabilities that are going into there. So does that play a role in this? And given that data warehousing has always been kind of adjacent to this, I actually, back when we used to make people do pitches for interviews at Pure, when I was interviewing here, I had to put together an Oracle data warehouse presentation. Yeah. And actually deliver that to Axel and a couple other people on the team. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I'm still here. So it must have sounded credible enough. But where do databases sit in all this when people are trying to craft these data pipelines and even moving to some of these lakehouse pooling kinds of models?
You're about to touch on like one of the more interesting conversations within the company at the moment. And so I'll start it with databases are the alpha and the omega.
Okay.
They begin and they end. And this is actually fairly true. Data creation starts in the OLTP database. And
Fair.
data takes two forms. It's structured or it's unstructured.
Yep.
In the OLTP database, you've got structured. It's the easiest data to work with. Unstructured is logs at the end of the day. So let's assume you start with either one of those. Somehow you're going to need to present it back up into the same interface. Guess what? It's a database.
Yeah.
You then have like problems happening, which have been happening for a while with analysts and data scientists, where they just love spinning up feature stores now. It's like we take a data set, we copy it into a database or a form, and then we spin it up like at scale, billions and billions of these. Billions is an over-exaggerated number. And so what's starting to happen is like companies have like thousands of databases and they're like, why do we have these?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just feature engineering at its core, of being able to add characterization to data. But then at the end of the day, if you really think about it, two things have happened. One, we had these AI use cases come out, and Chad mentioned RAG.
Yeah.
A key component of that is a vector database.
Sure.
We've seen market consolidation of all last year in 2024. We saw all these big new announcements. I'm now a vector database. The number of companies that have backed out of that is quite astounding. I had a chat to a few of them and I was like, wait, your vector functionality is no longer supported. And then what you've also seen is you've seen the very big players like the Oracle and the SQLs of the world come in with their own hybrid vector embedding use cases and functionality. So what you're really seeing is the alpha and the omega. Wherever you sit, the relational database is still the best single store of information, both for traditional enterprise applications, as well as AI augmented applications for like RAG use cases, because everything kind of falls back to the easiest to use interface. So where do databases fall into the entirety of the pipeline? The beginning, data creation. They're also a feature store consumer. They're also a use case consumer somewhere along whether you've identified your data going into that gold data set. You can present it back up into a database or into a scale-out query engine. And also feature stores, vector stores, etc. It's all the commonality of it.
I'm going to be expecting a Google Slides presentation of about 20 slides from you.
Are you prepared
using that alpha and omega analogy because I really like it, or I'm just going to flat out steal it and then not tell anyone that I got it from you, which is part of good marketing, right? Is borrowing. No, fascinating. I love that. I love that perspective. I want to bring this to where it's real for people, where people understand one of the successes. So I know, Chad, when we were talking, you've had recent success. We won't talk about the customer with Pure, but that you actually, have a case study you can share about, I guess, upgrading or replacing a Hadoop environment with a Dremio and Pure solution, which I think is pretty exciting because I think there's more opportunity to do that out there.
It is exciting. And it literally came up because the local SE that owns the account was out with the customer during an install, and he sees racks of gear, 10 full racks of commodity servers. Starts asking, he's like, what is that? And just starts talking to him. Turns out it was 10 full racks of a Hadoop cluster that gave them 9 petabytes raw storage, so roughly 3 petabytes usable storage. We start doing the math on that. It's probably 20 servers per rack times 10 racks, 200 servers, 400 power cables, 600 network
storage
cables.
Just plugged in. This is all DAS or JBODs or something.
Exactly. Just internal disk drives in there, anywhere from, I don't know the model of the server, 12 to 24 disks per server. The numbers pile up as you can get to. So when we started talking with them, they were already seeing the complexity and the cost of this from having to manage this over time. And they were actually looking also to simplify their data pipeline. He had mentioned Kafka on there. So they were looking to use Kafka to drop the data instead of having to go through the process of putting it into the Hadoop cluster, to be able to simplify it and land it in an Iceberg tables by way of, so Kafka for the message bus, and then drop that into the Iceberg table. And as soon as it's there, basically it can be queried with the query engine from Dremio. So when we really dug into that, to give them 3 petabytes usable storage, collapsed down from, again, 10 racks down to 12 rack units, fraction of the power cables. I think it was 10 power cables, 4 network cables, 5 network cables, including management. So the customer's comment on that was that the power savings alone would pay for the upgrade, but also now we're, again, simplifying it and taking the steps out of their data pipeline for them. And as an existing Pure customer, they're now able to take advantage of our enterprise data cloud and be able to manage this now as just part of their overall Pure implementation, and not have a point solution out there like they have today with the Hadoop cluster.
Yeah, they're saving all that power until they start bringing in GPUs. To fill in those 10 racks of that space.
So we're enabling them. So
but that is that was a real benefit when I had Anthony Nocentino on. It was kind of one of the things we talked about with the levels of consolidation, or maybe it was Chad Kenny. We were doing the launch episode. It was basically like, we look at a thing like a FlashArray XL 190 or 170, and that we get these huge ratios of 10, 20 racks to one of our, multi-RU types of storage arrays. That's space that's saved up. Okay, cool. There's a cost savings that, it's environmental that you can calculate, but typically those are going to start being consumed by GPU buildouts to do AI types of things. So we are enabling that, as you say, which is kind of cool. Yeah, definitely. It is good. Thanks for sharing that. Great to have an actual case studies there. We're going to jump into our hot take segment, which is fun. So hopefully you are ready for it. I was very friendly and gave you a brief preview of the questions ahead of time, so you won't have any of those brain stalls when it's the first time hearing. But let's start with a layup, and Andrew, I'll go to you first on this one. Hit a trend around data management. I can imagine you probably have 7 of these bouncing around in your head, but hit a trend around data management that you think IT leaders maybe have a blind spot for right now, something that they're missing, something they should pay more attention to.
I don't know if they're missing this, but I think it's the comprehensive side of it. It's the servicification of the entirety of the data estate.
Okay.
So very, very simply, where we've got DBASs, we've got like Databricks, which is a platform as a service. I don't think it's understood just how comprehensive the servicification of everything needs to be because it's just too complex.
So AAS being very extensive across the board relative to data, or there's growth in that space?
A bit of both. So if
Yeah.
you think about everything, a service is effectively a commercial model combined with some degree of automation.
Mhm.
Both of these things just across each stage of the general pipeline, to give it a really layman term. So your database has been servicified, your ingest tool will be servicified. Eventually, you've got to think of things in terms of, these are still fairly complex ecosystems. How do we servicify everything, including the governance layers? Like, what's automated compliance checking without human intervention look like? Weirdly enough, machine learning models make sense in that universe.
Sure. Yeah. Makes mental note to self to go check servicify in Merriam-Webster later to see if that's an actual word. It should be. We'll leave it there. Chad, what about you? Trend you think that folks are missing, or
I don't know how much
should we be paying more attention to?
I don't know how much of it is a trend, but
Yeah.
even just a recent thing that hit one of my customers, and I know they are thinking about it, but is around security and just management of that data. I know they're looking at it. I know it's on the concern of theirs, but I'm amazed at how many customers we have that don't even take advantage of some of our basic security features that are just built in and part of our system. And we had a customer had an incident last week and they hadn't been using that. It could have saved them. So I know it's not a new trend. It's not anything as exciting about his, but I definitely would like to see more people take advantage of it, because I'm really surprised when we ask, how many people are taking advantage of your safe mode snapshots to protect your data and things like that. And the hands don't go up. It's surprising to me.
Yeah. The reality is you don't know you need it until you need it, right? And then there's also budgets that are finite, right? So it's like, well, we've done these things for security, we'll probably be good enough. And then it's not good enough. It's probably like us in the old days when we used to beg people to actually patch Solaris. Would you please patch Solaris?
Why do you want to?
Well, why? Why would I want to do that all the time? Well, we put these security fixes in the OS and you want to have the latest security. That was the main reason that we would just go around and tell people, would you please go patch Solaris?
Please. Yep. But it's working. I don't want
it's working. I don't want to touch it. And then we come here, we have this whole non-disruptive upgrades things where like you can just go do Purity and not have it mess with anything. But I digress. All right. Okay, let's get to Andrew. I'm going to hit you on this one because I think you have a good one that we chatted about briefly, but this is the screw up question, right? So whether you messed something up as a practitioner, you know somebody that did, or you were involved with a customer deployment, something went horribly wrong. And what was that?
So I had to actually like deep dive my brain to get rid of the trauma for a moment.
Had you pushed it?
Yeah, I did.
Pushed it way to a dark place where you would never find it again.
So I was given control of an entire vCenter cluster that ran all of the training systems, and I was kind of like just messing around with how can I clone all of these things to create a test environment. And one of the options was to delete everything. One of the code changes I made was remove the don't delete these VMs.
That's sort of like the opposite of cloning in a way. I'm just saying, go ahead.
And it was busy deleting stuff. I was like, wait. And it started to really get rid of all the important stuff. And I was control-Cing like you couldn't believe. 800 VMs later, I had to rebuild the environment. That was a very unfun 3 months.
How many phone calls did you got?
No comment.
Okay. Fair enough. Pager?
All I'll say is there was live training happening at the time.
Okay. All right. So that was happening in real time. That was where screens were just going poof then. Oh, wow. Crazy. But you recovered. It just took time.
Absolutely.
3 months. Punishment for messing around. All right. Let's go back in the Wayback Machine a little bit here. It's always fun to get a little bit retrospective and think back, like I met you 20 years ago. Go back to yourself 20 years ago. What do you wish you knew, or what would you have told yourself about data management in the future? And we don't do stock investing with this question.
Sure.
Just something you wish you would have known.
I would have told myself to get more involved at the data layer earlier on and really start paying more attention to how companies are using data and how we can help move that forward, and been even more on the leading edge of it sooner.
Yeah, servers were fun then because we were all involved in servers and running business apps, but then we kind of grew up and realized that it's the data that informs what those things actually can do, right?
Exactly.
Same question, Andrew.
So let's go back 20 years, like doing my bachelor's, thinking DBAs are boring. I'm never going to do that job.
Little did you know. Little did you know. Why were they boring?
They just look like they
Because it was
stared at data all day.
writing queries and staring at data.
Yeah, well, we had an Oracle database on-prem,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm never touching that. That worked out well for me.
Yeah, you touched it more than you care to know. So it would have just been, realization that you actually could have had more of an optimistic view of data and database administration.
Yeah, or just be a little nicer to people who keep the lights on.
Yeah, well, for sure. They definitely do. They're the ones who get lots of exposure when things get challenging. All right. This has been a really fun romp through this topic with you and also the questions. We had some good levity as well. We've needed levity, a lot of serious topics lately that we've had going on. So let's take it back to data pipelines, data lakehouse, or just unified waterways or water pools of data. Just like we've had lake and swamp and where's the data ocean? I'm always wondering. But what's the takeaway? Chad, I'll start with you because you had that really good example with your customer that you helped with that solution. What's the takeaway for somebody out there that's kind of struggling and that's just going, well, I'm partly in the cloud with this cloud data warehouse and we're spending too much money and I've got users who are unhappy. What's the takeaway for folks? What should they be looking at?
Sure. I mean, Andrew had mentioned all the different stages of the data pipeline, right? With your relational databases, you've got your things like your Kafka, your message buses, and moving the data around. And regardless of the type of storage or data access you need for that, whether you need the very low latency transactional or you need very high throughput for a part of that data pipeline, Pure Storage has the ability to build that infrastructure and provide that workload to the end user applications. And we can do it in a way that doesn't require tuning. And again, what I already mentioned, the Enterprise Data Cloud allows you to manage it all as a single cloud of data, essentially bringing cloud on, your on-prem cloud, looking at cloud as an operating model as opposed to a location. So certainly as they're seeing these challenges, get rid of or help alleviate the point solutions and be able to manage, bring the management and the performance much simpler.
Yeah. Or even explore what something like Evergreen One could do, right? If this is in a state of growing data over time, eliminate some of the risk and look at that subscription, that SLA. I mean, not even subscription. I like to talk SLAs, right? We have an SLA, a service level agreement around how and where you want to manage that data and where you need to expand or contract or move things around. It gets very powerful.
And it works beautifully because we know nobody's going to flip a switch overnight and move all of their data. So that gives them a migration strategy without having to invest in a massive amount of infrastructure right out of the gate, so they can grow it as they grow.
Yeah. Only Andrew would flip a switch and then eliminate all the data.
I'm going to relive this for a few weeks now. I hope you know
I'm
that.
so happy you brought that up. now I can chat with you. I can remind you of that over and over again. I'm so happy right now. Your takeaway, because you love this space, right? I mean, that's why I wanted to, Chad was in town, but I wanted to have you on. You guys have worked together in this stuff too, which is great. But we've had more conversations over your time here around this, and I know you just have such passion. So what's your closing thoughts for people thinking about improving in this area?
Have better governance practices, not just data governance,
Straightforward.
governance practices. To elaborate on the thought, too many customers are talking about, my cloud spend has gotten too much. That means you don't have the appropriate governance practices to control what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You need a better strategy long-term for understanding where you are and where you might go with appropriate mitigation. I like bringing up the EDC messaging because the EDC messaging also thinks about things in terms of a holistic data presence wherever you need to go. And if you think about your governance practices interrupted with that, one, cost is a major vector of it. If cost exceeds Y, maybe we should move back on-prem. How do we do this while minimizing risk and still guaranteeing appropriate SLAs? Do this across the entirety of the pipeline, from the transaction store through to the analytics foundation, through to the AI ML estate. That's the entirety of what I believe EDC really offers, is the ability to move between these different tiers and different capabilities while reducing risk.
From the alpha to the omega. Brought it full circle right there. See what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
That's why I get paid the big bucks to host this thing, because I can do those kinds of things. No, that's fantastic. Where could folks find you? You're probably both on LinkedIn. Anything else that you're up to that is plug worthy? They can find you out
I'm
traveling
definitely
around, right?
they'll see me around marketing or a lot of our events that we host in different cities are tech summits. We love to have folks come out to those. It's great seeing people in person at those. So keep an eye out for invitations to your local tech summit.
Awesome.
From Pure. And like you said, I'm on LinkedIn.
Cool. Those are good events. Silly?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I recently also kind of gotten back into blogging.
Oh,
So like
all right.
my latest thing is just like taking really weird market trends, like for example, the modern database, and hitting it over the head with common sense.
I saw you publish one recently.
I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Like I'm bringing my normal snark to it as well.
Right. Well, we should get some of those opinions out on the Pure community as well. There's always a home for your blogs over there.
Yeah, very true.
We can do that. All right. Thanks, gents. Absolute pleasure to have you in studio. Thanks for letting me know that you were traveling.
Yeah.
And you're just upstairs, so we may be dragging you down here to do this more frequently because it's a lot of fun. And thank you out there for watching this episode of the Pure Report and listening to the audio version. It's a pleasure to bring these to you and keep telling friends, telling colleagues about the program. We keep the great guests. I have to edit that out. And we'll keep the great guests like Andrew and Chad coming on to the program. And with that, we will wrap for Pure Storage and my good friends, Chad Hedred, Andrew Silifant. This is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gating on you.